We were smack dab in the middle of the 80s, and so far, Spielberg has made films about killer sharks, benevolent aliens, and exotic adventures. Now, to add to his filmography, a movie about oppressed black women, domestic violence, and incest. Well, yes, after making a career out of what many called mindless escapist entertainment, it was The Color Purple, based on the Alice Walker novel of the same name, that marked Spielberg's foray into so-called serious dramatic territory. Nowadays, Spielberg constantly ping-pongs between good old-fashioned entertainment and dramatic, serious films. But at the time, the fact that Spielberg was deciding to make a film with such heavy topics led to much confusion and outrage, with some saying he's making the movie only to win an Oscar after so many losses. And if those previous losses hurt, then this was the biggest sting of all, as despite being nominated in 10 categories, including Best Picture, and 2 supporting actress nods for a total of 11 nominations, Best Director was conspicuously absent from its nods, and ultimately, the film left the ceremony without a single win. Its Oscar results are emblematic of the critical reception of the time and even today. Some see it as a triumphant change of pace for Spielberg, an engrossing and powerful human drama made with great care. Others see it as a disgusting aberration, done by a director woefully out of his element. I've seen it, and I like it. A lot. It's not perfect, but I think it did more right than some people realize. So I guess we've got to address the elephant in the room. Why Spielberg? Why not a black man? Why not a woman? Why not a black woman? Why not literally anyone else to helm this story? Well, believe it or not, that's a question Alice Walker, author of the novel, asked. Immensely popular and successful thanks to her creation, which itself has been challenged time and again, she was wary of any film adaptation of the work, and more so since depiction of black people and women in film had been atrocious up to this point. So to ensure that the film would be the best and most honest it could be, it was actually Spielberg who had to be interviewed by Walker to see if he was really the best person for the job, and eventually Walker decided to let him do it, as not only did she feel he was very sensitive to the material, but his clout in Hollywood would give him a nice budget, final cut privilege, and the likelihood that it would be seen by as many people as possible. And even still, Walker remained closely tied to the production as a consultant. It wasn't a perfect marriage. Spielberg once said out loud in front of Walker that Gone with the Wind was the greatest movie ever, and there was another incident/misunderstanding where Spielberg asked Walker to cameo in the film as a servant holding his newborn son, to which Walker had to explain to Spielberg that black women holding white children had a long and complicated history. Despite this, she also understood that Spielberg's suggestion was done not out of malice but out of ignorance. I say all this not to change your mind about what you may already think of a movie like this, only to inform you as best I can to the thoughts and feelings of the people who worked on it. And that's where I'll stop, because I am not a woman, I am not black, and I have not read the novel. Most of my knowledge about it comes from reading the Joseph McBride Spielberg biography and this digibook, so make of that what you will. From here on out, I'll discuss this movie as a movie, removed from anything beyond. The time period is the early 20th century. The location is the Deep South, and the character is Celie. The film follows her life from a young teenager to a grown woman and the many trials and tribulations she faces. First, she's abused and raped by her father, who gives away the 2 children she births, and then abused and raped by a man she addresses as Mr., all the while forced to take care of his loud-mouthed wild children, compounded by the racism and short-sightedness of the few white people she encounters in the nearby town. All of this weighs on her to make her quiet and diminutive, but things change when she finds Sophia, a strong-willed matriarch, and Shug Avery, a free-spirited showgirl and singer. From them, she draws the strength and spirit to soldier on with the ultimate, seemingly impossible goal of reuniting with her long-lost sister and her 2 children. If that synopsis wasn't enough of an indication, there's a lot to unpack. Hell, it's a solid 30 minutes before we even get to see the adult version of Celie, played by Whoopi Goldberg. More on her later. But Spielberg makes it all palatable with a pretty clever approach, and that is viewing this as a Dickens piece. For all of you who didn't pay attention in middle school English, Charles Dickens is a classic novelist known for Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, and most famously A Christmas Carol, among many others. I'm not gonna act like I'm the biggest Dickens scholar, but I get the gist. He tells stories of life, of intrepid, shrewd protagonists born out of their environment, but also responding to it, and the many colorful souls they encounter along the way. That's the same route Color Purple takes, showing how Celie's life and environment are equal parts beautiful and horrifying, funny and terrifying, reflecting traditional values held since before her time to radical new ideas being presented to her. This approach could have failed if not for the absolutely terrific performances on screen. With the exception of 2 other Spielberg films we're gonna get to, this might have the best ensemble cast in his filmography. It's fascinating to see Whoopi Goldberg here, because nowadays I see her as such a personality all by herself, and when I do see her as an actress, it's usually in comedic roles. But as the saying goes, you can't turn a dramatic actor into a comedian, but you can turn a comedian into a dramatic actor. Goldberg's performance is full of nuance, subtlety, and sheer humanity. It's an even greater achievement considering how much Celie changes throughout the film, and the way Goldberg portrays the transformation is entirely convincing and captivating, worthy of the Oscar nomination she received. Also worthy of their nominations were Margaret Avery as Shug Avery and, yes, Oprah Winfrey as Sophia. Crazy to see how many powerhouse stars got their start here. Anyways, both serve as excellent foils to Celie while being well-rounded in their own right. They each have their own obstacles to overcome and inner demons to conquer, from Sophia's strong spirit being battered and tested by a society built by sexism and racism, to Shug Avery trying to reconnect with her estranged father, a preacher who sees her life as sinful. They hover around Celie, drawing out her innermost thoughts and feelings, and they in turn learn a lot from her as well. So strong are the relationships and so convincing is the acting that the 2.5-hour runtime tends to breeze by, helped in no small part by a wonderful supporting cast. The cherry on top is the lyrically beautiful cinematography. Alan Daviau is back from his work in E.T. and is allowed to further flex his muscles by really accentuating the environment and the vibrant colors to paint a delicate canvas that is sad and beautiful at the same time. Much criticism has been pointed at the film for this fact, saying that Spielberg is romanticizing the environment. And, well, he is. But it is consistent with the tone that he's going for. And there were also many others that said Spielberg didn't properly represent poverty. However, Walker made it very clear in the novel that this is a wealthy family with land and furniture to spare. Says more about you than anything else. Moving on, the score also complements the visuals perfectly. It's not done by John Williams, but by Quincy Jones, who's also producer on the movie. A specific reason for this, I'm not really sure, and of course there are very few who can compare with their natural God-given talent that Williams has, but it's still a very pleasant score. There's a lot more to talk about with this movie, but we have to stop somewhere. All the elements I've mentioned combine to make a truly unique film. For so many critics' complaints of fakeness and aestheticization, there's a life and a spirit to this movie that's palpable in every frame, in every line, and in every look. There's a reason this film moves people to tears the way it does, and it's because while Celie's struggles are specific to her as a person, they speak to universal truths we all share, about trying to break free from our constraints, about reconciling family and love with fear and hate, about just trying to find some happiness in a world that seems out to take it away from you. It's these truths that are conveyed so beautifully in this film, and that lead to so many stunning and heart-wrenching sequences. To some, it may feel fake and forced, and I do empathize with that sentiment. Truly, I do. Like I said, I don't share the point of view as Celie, or even close to it for that matter, so my opinion isn't exactly gospel. But for me, personally, I really did tear up at the ending. I was so moved, and even now, just thinking about it, I get a little bit emotional. I choose to just give myself over to this movie, and to forgive some of its shortcomings. It may be schmaltzy, it may be flawed, but just like how Shug loves Celie, I love this movie, imperfections and all.